Good morning, good afternoon, and good afternoon, and good afternoon, and good evening, wherever the heck in the world you are, folks. It's the one and only V, the Guerrilla Economist, and I have with us my main man, W. He needs no introduction. You know where he is. You know who he is. Actually, you don't know where he is. He's on the Cold War submarine, lurking somewhere in the North Pacific. That's all I will say. Anything else, and I'll put myself in danger, and don't want to do that. He is Mr. Dajan himself, the international man of mystery. And with that being said and all out of the way, I'm juggling two things. I'm launching a show and I'm on the phone on a conference call is going on the other line with institutional clients. But this is important, and that's why I have my man W on. W, go ahead, buddy. What's going on? What's happening?
Well, obviously, things continue to march away here. People are, wondering how this is going to continue to flesh out. One thing that I had said to your audience several years back when President Trump first took office was that before he was done, he was going to nationalize the Federal Reserve. And so, that seemed like a pretty audacious statement at the time.
Yes, it did.
And I had said in other places, I said before he took office when he was still running as a candidate that several times that before this was over, the Fed was going to have to be nationalized. But, there was, a lot of headwinds there and people didn't understand what that would look like. Certainly for decades, plenty of people, myself included, have made a big stink about the fact that the IRS itself, courts during cases have said that the IRS is a Puerto Rican corporation. And certainly it's administered by federal employees, the collection of the income tax. But the IRS, where your check goes, what it's cashed for, goes to a Puerto Rican corporation. Well, where's the Federal Reserve? Federal Reserve is a private banking institution and has been administered by the heads of the regional banks here across the United States, and then going out to Basel, Switzerland, with what amounts to an international Federal Reserve, and using our dollar all over the world for other people's purposes, transferring the control of the dollar to Saudi Arabia with this oil-backed dollar, and thereby being able to siphon off funds to these black operations, these black hats, these globalists who are managing the value of our money, the stability of our money, because they manage the oil that the money is backed by. And then, of course, force us to use our Navy, our Air Force, our military, our State Department, our political strength to control the flow of oil over the world, to protect it for their purposes. What is not really understood by a lot of people, I think your audience is unique because we have talked about these things numerous times over the years. This plan, as it's emerging and as people are beginning to see it on a global scale, is about breaking the back of these people who've been controlling us as a nation by controlling how we get to access to our resources, how we are able to use our own money, the power of the press, our own tax base, and the genius of the plan that these military leaders, the intelligence team behind the scenes that is has brought President Trump to power and has protected him while in power. They've been fighting this from the beginning as a type of war. It's not a coup; it's a forceful takeover, taking back the republic away from these people who have stolen it. That really the U.S. has been. I've used the term for at least a decade. The U.S. is a captured operation. That we were somebody else's tool and have been for decades and decades. And so this taking of America back, this hostile takeover, is now underway to take back our country and our republic. A lot of the energy that has been used against us here in the country is these foreign drug dealing gangs. I mentioned when I was with you the other day the situation with the Jalisco gang group that has been bringing drugs into the U.S. and was managed externally by China. Another gang that's under heavy attack right now down in Honduras is MS-13. And, you know, Honduras was really almost, we called it an aircraft carrier, an American aircraft carrier, because we were so heavily entrenched there in our war from, you know, the 70s and 80s forward in South America. The work that was going on into Nicaragua and other places that were the basis for Iran-Contra. Honduras was really the forward leading edge of that, where our personnel rallied and then went to go other places where the foreign troops came to get their supplies, etc. And so we were very heavily involved there. This MS-13 gang has become extremely powerful, and there's no way to describe them except as satanic. Mm-hmm. The tattoos, the presentation, a common theme amongst these MS-13 members is that if they're afraid of getting caught or they need help to complete something they're going to do, and they need literally help from Lucifer, help from the devil.
Yeah, they do that.
They'll give a soul to Lucifer. They'll kill somebody, make them a sacrifice so that they can get something. Literally, you can go Google the stories and search them out, and you'll see that I'm absolutely correct. So this is a vicious, horrible gang. The gangs that we were fighting in South America, that the drug import operations into the U.S., Russia and China both, and by the way, into Europe, Russia and China both were trying to get control of governments across South America using the drug money, and to take over those governments to control drug flow into the U.S. And so while there was many very bad things that happened with U.S. involvement in centralizing the drug trade to Colombia, and then taking half of all of the resources that they developed as it came into the U.S., the marking of the drugs so we could see what was coming from Colombia and what was coming from everywhere else. Russia and China, the shining path from China, extremely vicious gang, unbelievably vicious towards the locals. The gangs in Mexico, people just they've conveniently set it aside, but Mexico has been under siege by these dark forces for decades and decades, with the amount of deaths being just horrendous. And Honduras the same way, very controlled. Part of what was happening here in the U.S., what was intended to happen more so, was that these drug gangs, these mafiosa, that were really being controlled primarily out of China at this point in time, but there's a Russian component there too, were going to be the muscle side here in the U.S. and become much more forceful. The amount of weapons and their tactics were becoming incomprehensible to a normal American psyche with what was going on. Remember this drug seizure in the Long Beach port last year,
right,
in February. That drug seizure had enough fentanyl in it to kill every man, woman, and child in North America. Just one seizure, plus all the other drugs that were there. When you realize that, we really have been in a war. And at the end of the day, in a very real sense, because these were Chinese gangs only lightly veiled as to their Chinese origins that were running these other operations out of these local locations. Once you kind of get that in your mind, it helps to put in perspective all the things that the president and the generals are doing to get us cut off from that. Those people that have had, drug addictions here in the country, how easy do you think it is for them to get their drugs right now? What kind of situation are they in? How long will their supplies last? And that's just the normal drugs, not even talking about the hybrids that have been coming in out of China also for some of these elites that is very, difficult to talk about, these blood products. So we're reaching a point now where as much time has gone on to get us to this point of a national shutdown, what lies ahead? Why is it even, what do I have to say additional to last week that might get people's attention that they might need to know? And so I think that the reason I wanted to share a couple things with your audience is to help them to get their mind around how long this might take, what the extent of these operations are, just how much is at stake. And, at least if you kind of know what's coming, it's sort of a inside track. We may not know with minute detail each and everything that's planned over the next weeks and months. But if you get kind of an overview, it helps you to not be, take some of the stress out. And in an extended way, if you have a sense of what's coming, you can help people around you to be able to take deep breaths and realize this is not ill-advised. This is not a shallow thing. This isn't just about the attack on us with a bioweapon. This is a lot deeper, a lot more fundamental. And the folks that are in our court, on our side, do really have our best interests in mind and are doing absolutely what is needed to free us as the people moving forward from these devices that these controllers that would enslave us have had in place, and we're further locking down to secure their future, to own this planet, and to really depopulate, deindustrialize, shut down us as a people, as a republic, while they move forward with their New World Order agenda to own the world. That kind of click for you there, V?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me just use kind of an example here. I mentioned the numbers a lot because the communication between all these various players is done by the numbers.
Right.
That's this hidden aspect. It makes people's eyes cross. They get all frustrated. It's not that complicated. And if you don't want to follow it on the numbers, at least knowing that they are communicating back channel right in front of your face, oftentimes with these numbers, is a big deal. For example, in his press conference yesterday, President Trump used this number 151 several times. Now, why did he do that? 151. What in the world is 151? 151 is a palindrome number.
Yeah.
It's the same forwards and backwards.
Right.
So what's the hinge point? The 5. And it's 15 forward, 15 backward. So what's the relevance of that? 5 is the number for the occult, this crowd that is a religion in Washington, D.C., that is a religion across the world. This crowd, this occultic crowd, they see 5 as the number of death to enemies, and defense.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've said many, 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 many times, why is the Pentagon a 5-sided building?
Death to enemies and defense.
That's right. And what does the Pentagon do? Death to enemies and defense.
Correct.
So they have put their symbology right in front of your face. Oh, it's really a cool shape. It was a good architect idea. You know what?
Yeah.
No, there's a lot more meaning to that, and it's this ritual symbology, sacred geometry, etc. So then, what does it mean from a biblical side, from a Christian side, which they believe that they're at war with? They're not just putting up with us. They're shutting us down, because it really is this occult group. They are satanic. It's as simple as that. You can, no, they're just well-meaning, and they just have kind of a view of things and it works for them. No, they're satanic. Period.
Correct.
So you want to have that argument, go back to the kids' table. We're at the adult table here. Sorry. The number 5 from a biblical standpoint is grace. And so that is, an important thing from a Christian standpoint, to get grace, to be freed from the consequences of sin, the penalty of sin. We're coming up on this Easter holiday, the Passover, the Resurrection Day, which, by the way, Passover is on the 9th of April. It starts at sunset and goes through sunset on the 10th. That's also Good Friday. A lot of people get all, wound up about Easter and the Easter Bunny and other stuff. The reality is that from a Christian perspective, once again, that is our holiday being captured. And it's a perfect example of what's going on with our whole country, all of the people. The holiday has been captured by these Ishtar, Isis worshipers. Mm-hmm. This cult that rules around the world in DC and other places. They've converted this Christian holiday of Easter into this pagan holiday of Ishtar. Ishtar was the priestess to the moon.
Fertility goddess.
The fertility goddess. She had a gate at Babylon. She was one of the goddesses of Babylon. Ishtar Gate in Babylon. She was the queen of heaven. And she, various times down through history, it's the same deities, demonic deities, but they changed their name. Ishtar, Isis, Eoster,
Ashtaroth.
Ashtaroth, over and over again. You see it's the same symbology. Diana, Venus, many things like that. So, but it's the same goddess, and just slightly different names, but the same, extrapolations of the basic fable, etc. They change their names all the time, just like these people in the families change their name. Clinton's a Rockefeller. His father was Winthrop Rockefeller. The Rockefeller name is annoying, but they change their names, morph them, and you don't recognize it's the same family group down through the ages of Michael Rockefeller. Go look it up. Who is he? So there you go. And so we see these things changed, but it's the same thing over and over again. 99 and 44 100% pure. So then we look at what's about to happen here right now. What's the meaning, not just of the symbology, but of the dates. I mentioned to your audience last week that this period, this 10-day period from 320 to 330 of 2020 was symbolic on the numbers, and that it was very important in this overall scheme of things, because these numbers have ritual meaning. for example, the 320 of 2020, for these people, you can read that as a 322, 322, 322.
Yep.
23 is a date. Anything with imprinted with number 23 affects the whole world. And so you had this 323, a palindrome, 23 either direction. All of these dates have had ritual value, ritual meaning. And 329, 2 and 9 is 11. So the 29th, yesterday, was 29 is also code for 9/11. But 329, 2 and 9 being 11, that's 3 times 11, a 33. And then today, the 30th, 330, 33, I dropped the zeros. What's tomorrow? I'm getting to my main point here.
331.
Yes, but the way you say it,
331.
the way you say it from a European standpoint is what?
313.
Mm-hmm. And what's that?
313.
Palindrome 13. Why is 13 important? Because it's the number of the bloodline families of this royalty that is promoting these religions in plain sight, that are these satanic Luciferian worshipers. Why is that important to us in the financial areas? Because they're controlling the monetary instruments and products that affect the market. City of London, the Queen herself has to curtsy to the mayor of London.
The mayor of the city of London.
The mayor of the city of London.
Less people think that the Queen is curtsying before Sadiq Khan. That's not what W is saying.
Mm-hmm. And so she has to present herself once a year. And when she comes into the city of London, she has to take off her shoes.
Yep.
So who's more powerful there in England? The bloodline is still bowing to the monetary powers. All of the major banking institutions run out of the city of London. When President Trump the other day moved Fed operations back to the Treasury's control, it was the beginning of a transfer of power, control over the dollar and its printing, management, everything away from the Federal Reserve. He moved Federal Reserve management back under Treasury control. They're going to dismantle and extract themselves out of this globalist monetary system. And who's going to be in trouble? They've put all their eggs in that basket. And we're taking control of the dollar. And we're about to have a war like you just can't even imagine in the financial markets. With things at this pause moment, you might remember, V, that I've talked about the work we did in the 80s to collapse the ruble in Russia, but that was only one part of the operation. We fought World War III and we won during the Reagan administration. We won it at the beginning of the first Bush administration, but the die was already cast. And we did it on three fronts. There's arguably a fourth, but three primary fronts, which is we collapsed oil prices, which meant that Russia, which was extremely dependent then for revenue from foreign oil sales, we collapsed oil prices, and that sopped up all of their cash to export war, to create problems, for example, in Nicaragua and South America. In Nicaragua, they're sending these Hind D helicopters down there, the fives. And
one of my favorite helicopters, by the way, but go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's, it's the helicopter you see in the what movie was it?
Rambo.
The Rambo. Yeah, that's the one.
They took what did they take? They took a Sea King, a Sikorsky Sea King, and they modified it to make it look like a Hind 24. Yep.
So the Model 5 versions that were running there in Nicaragua.
Hmm.
We didn't know it until Larry Nichols out of Arkansas was the guy that was actually there as a contractor. Had a videographer studio. Oh yeah, all right. He's a former SEAL team member. You know, what you have for on your moniker doesn't necessarily have very much to do with what you're actually doing. So he's down there as a video editor, running a video studio. He's former SEAL team 8 member, I believe it was, and he's down in Nicaragua getting film showing the first time that we knew that these helicopters could back up in flight. We thought they had to maintain forward travel. And once we knew that, that changed the tactics you could use for the guerrillas trying to take them out. Everybody that had seen that died after they saw it because the helicopter back up and rake them over until they were gone. So anyway, coming back to this battle we're in right now, this Palindrome 13, the 13 bloodline families, the royal families that have been ruling through the Commonwealth countries and all over the world through the monetary system, etc. This date, tomorrow, 31-3, is an important number. I call these palindromes saloon doors. When you're doing the calculations, the math on a lot of the stuff that's going on, to observe how they're communicating, what they're saying to each other, you have to look at those as hinges, a double hinged door. And so a lot of times you'll see a palindrome and you look at the numbers before and after to see what's going on. One of the features that I've never shared anywhere, when I said the market's plateau was 29,000 and change, there's a series of numbers that were there at that specific point. And then there was a hinge number, a palindrome, that told which way. You had to see the numbers on either side of it to know which way the market would go from that plateau, up or down. And so in going back and looking at the numbers here, which I'm not through yet, some point in the future, maybe I'll share that. But there was a palindrome and it showed a downside. And of course, the market then did collapse catastrophically. And for those that haven't heard, I said what the market peak would be back in the late 90s. And again, after 9/11 and in 2008 and 9, and again in 2012 and 13, and more recently, that there was an internal code that showed the market with a plateau at 29,000 and change. So people are going, oh, the market's going to collapse. It's going to be the end of the world and blah, blah, blah. I thought, no, that's not what they're coding to each other. That's not what they're telling each other in these numbers, in their codes, internal codes. So then what would be the other side of this particular saloon door hinge? They've got all their stuff. They've got everything come up. They had their 10 days of fun. We're getting things wound down. But it wasn't the 10 days of darkness that has been commonly a theme within the Q community that they've looked for. What could be the 10 days of darkness that amount to maybe rolling communications blackouts for periods of time and back on and things like that. I don't think it's an absolute, pitch black type of a thing, but I think we're going to see some drama. Well, it's April 1st.
Right.
And from the Q perspective, these people are stupid. They're fools. They have a day dedicated to them in their normal Julian calendar, which is April Fool's Day. And so President Trump is a great showman. We have kind of a three-ring circus of dramas going on around us right now. And I mentioned, what we were doing in the Soviet Union when we took down the Russian economy. The other two components was oil, the religious war in through Poland, and that was really a religious conflict. Wasn't just the labor unions. because of their control from the state government of religious practice in Poland and out through the rest of Russia. We were involved in an awakening in Russia. In fact, Russia's been going through a spiritual awakening
Right.
For a couple of decades now. And they've
been fighting this mess for a very long time, man.
Yeah. The third place that we went after them was in their currency, the ruble.
Yeah.
When Gorbachev changed the agreement at the last second, or tried to, with Reagan at Reykjavik, and Reagan would not agree to it, he came back and he was absolutely livid and was not going to put up with what was presented. And then he signed an executive finding that said that a currency, rather generic, very bland, you have to understand what the context is. A currency, if it's offered outside of a country for purchase or sale, even though the law inside the country says that it cannot be transferred outside the country, that it's a closed economy, closed market, and their currency cannot be sold and transferred outside the country. If by chance the currency does show up outside the country, it is not breaking the law. And so American agents, American or any other person for that matter, and reads very, blandly, are doing no violation of U.S. law to purchase that currency, and corporations, etc. So we created a market for rubles outside of the Soviet Union. Russian people, eventually generals and everybody else, started transferring rubles outside the country till we're getting pallet loads, small plane loads of rubles every way you can imagine. And we're purchasing them with currency that we got through trading. That's what the software was used for, that allowed us to go and back channel in all of the banking around the world. And then, of course, we had to be careful not to step on other transactions. So we had to know what the codes were on the transactions so that we wouldn't damage other transactions that would hurt things. And that's why we know there's, knew the code to stay out of the way of other transactions. We might damage something. So with that all in mind, now we get to what's this next phase with this April Fools. Trump has a three-ring circus. He's got oil stuff going on in the Mideast, around the world, down in Venezuela, oil prices here in the U.S., yet we're an exporter now for the first time in 50 years, 60 years here in the U.S. with our oil production. He brought oil production home. That means that the basis for the value of the dollar is based here at the homeland, in the country, and not in the Mideast for the first time in decades and decades and decades. We control our own fate. All of the other places, remember, for example, Saudi Arabia, the CIA crowd, the people Brennan and before, the Rockefeller crowd, the Clintons and before, they controlled oil flow out of Saudi Arabia, Aramco, Arab American Oil Corporation, to their advantage. And then they're clipping the money off the top of that for whatever they want to do for power, to export power around the world. They could pick the kings. If you got a contract for delivery of oil by the Saudis, then that was a license to print money. So they would pick their political partners, their business partners. So if you're in the right family group, if you're of the right bloodline, you'd get the big oil sale at a set price and be able to go out and make gazillions of dollars, whether it was oil for airlines or shipping or for a regional country. Obviously, the reason we were doing what we were doing in Syria is because that crowd with the Saudis and, painful to say, but the Jews too, Mossad.
Right.
Israel had a component in what we were doing there. There was Mossad training camps also in Libya, training those fighters to go up and fight in Syria. So this is really got to be looked at as this globalist plot, this globalist agenda that was involving all these players creating the next energy pipeline to Europe. And at the same time, using IMF money and players for their maiden revolutions in the Ukraine, and to stop oil flow out of Russia and gas flow out of Russia to Europe. A huge energy play. Energy, what makes the world go around? Energy. What's the primary energy at this point in time? Oil and gas. It still is. So they can talk against it all they want, but they're actually trying to control it, because then you're locking in your customer for the next 50 or 100 years. So with what President Trump is doing in this three-ring circus, we also have, similar to what we did in World War III, taking down the Soviet Union. By the way, we won, because the Soviet Union no longer exists.
Right.
We won that war, and it was a relatively bloodless war. There's a lot of people that I would name, that somewhere should be on a wall and have a star, but they don't hit the radar correctly now. Their role isn't known or understood correctly now. A lot of bad guys that might not have been such bad guys.
Right.
And a lot of Casper Milquetoast guys that looked like the butcher, the tailor, the candlestick maker, that were really something far more than people around them, even in their families, understood. And they have to stay in character. One of them's wife said he's a really bad guy. He had to stay in character. She loved him, but he's a really bad guy. Yeah, well, had to stay in character. So what's President Trump managing right now in this three-ring circus? Something similar. We're doing an oil war in the Mideast, Venezuela, the way we produce here. There's the monetary side with the dollar and the Federal Reserve, similar to what happened with the ruble in Russia, and everything's on the line. And what are we doing? We're bringing the control of that valuation and the debt load related to it for printing it back under Treasury control. We're not going to pay these people that got that control through graft, through various types of mischief any longer. This is a military operation with a forceful take back of our country, a type of coup. And the thing about these people, the way that they function, they're not going to just give it back over to us. They're not going to roll over and die. They may not have seen it fully coming, but they do see this as this silent war, where we're maneuvering for a whole planet to get control back under U.S. control, U.S. persons, U.S. citizens' control. And at the same time, there is a religious war. In some broadcasts I did over the last week or two, I mentioned that this book of the Bible, Esther, which, by the way, for any of you Q people out there, what number in the sequence of books in the Bible is it where Esther shows up?
17.
17. 17 is the number of victory from a biblical standpoint. For the bad guys, the occultists, these numbers have different meanings. They're trying to capture away from God's people these numbers for their own victory, their own use. So what's 17 from an occultist standpoint? 17 is the number of Osiris. It's this core number to this religion that Washington, D.C. is built around. Osiris, the whole story of Osiris is that his brother saw how evil he was and killed him. And when he killed him, he chopped his body into 14 pieces and he scattered them over the whole world. His mother, Isis, Osiris's mother, Isis, saw that he'd been killed, went out and found all the pieces but one. And she reassembled his body. But she couldn't find his penis. So she fashioned one out of stone. And then she had sex with her son. And she conceived a child. And the child from that sex with her own son is Horus. And Horus is the sun god. So as a memorial to her son and to her offspring by that son, via this dildo, this, piece of stone that she's, supposedly gotten pregnant through. We have obelisks, monuments, towers built all over the world. And those obelisks, those towers are things like the Washington Monument, the obelisk in the Vatican Square, and other places in cities around the world. Space Needle on the West Coast, things like that. They're constantly including in their architecture these monuments to Osiris because it is a religion for them. Washington, D.C., in that particular case, the Washington Monument, everything in the city rotates around, revolves around, is central. The obelisk is central to all of them. And where its shadow is cast has a lot to do with when things are done, not just its sun shadow, but its moon shadow. Which agency, what time the moon or sun shadow casts across that building, and then an event or news announcement, etc., is made at that exact time. So Washington, D.C. has been running, it's a captured operation, it's been running as a religion. All these Christians, God bless America. Really? Which God? The institutions of D.C. are centered around this occult variation. So you got to wonder, well, which God is it that you're looking to bless America if that's what's the center of the country? I would even just do a distraction and mention from a church standpoint, what's happened to Resurrection Sunday, the resurrection event itself? How do we pick the day that Easter is celebrated in churches all over the world? What's the guiding factor? Is it a calendar date based on the calendar date that Christ actually was crucified and then resurrected days later? No, it's based on a moon rising after the spring equinox. And it varies every year because it's based on this moon calendar. Who was this fertility goddess out of Babylon? And before that, the Sumerians. That was the priestess to the moon. Ishtar. Eostre, as it was called in England a couple centuries back. And what were the people bringing as gifts to Molech, to Baal, at these Molech Baal altars, such as the one that was at the top of the Tower of Babel? Well, they brought him flowers, they brought him candies and bread, sweet breads. Those were the offerings to Moloch. What do you have at Easter? You have painted eggs to the fertility goddess, bunny rabbits. It's the spring fertility goddess, Semiramis, Isis, Ishtar. And that's become relevant to the church in Isaiah, or excuse me, in Ezekiel. I can't remember. I think it's 19 verses 20 through 21 or something. Some of your people will know it. It talks about Ezekiel was brought to outside the temple, and by the way, this comes back to money. I'm coming back to money. You guys want to talk about markets? If you don't understand this stuff, you don't understand how they think, you won't be able to understand markets. You think it's separated, it's all different. It's not. It's right there in Washington, D.C. It's right there in the markets. If you don't understand, you're looking at a religion running the markets, then you're making all your calculations based on disinformation because it's a captured operation and you're not getting it. So if you think I'm not talking to your crowd, this crowd over here, your audience, V, because I'm talking about religion and religious holidays, then you're missing everything. Go watch another show, go listen to somebody else. I'm talking to the guys that understand what's going on in plain sight right in front of them. So this Easter holiday is based on a moon phase. We are seeing these people working in plain sight to do their magic and to work their magic through it, their various gods and goddesses in plain sight. Market timing, the numbers is all telegraphed between each other through this type of coding. The real dates within this religious stuff relate back to, for example, with the Passover, the Jewish Passover, which is also the Christian Passover, that occurred in Egypt. It was the last event in Egypt before the slaves were set free. This last plague against the government of Egypt, against Pharaoh, against the people of Egypt, because they wouldn't set God's people free. They wanted to keep them enslaved because they made them money. They, were the labor, allowed the rest of the Egyptians to lounge around, relax, just have to manage your slaves well. So God sent 10 plagues on them. The last plague was that because Pharaoh wouldn't let God's people go, kept them in slavery, Moses decreed that the firstborn child of every house would die. And that on a date certain, the death angel would pass over Egypt. And the only way that you could be protected from the death angel, this dark angel over Egypt, as it passed over from taking the firstborn, would be that you had to take a lamb, sacrifice it, and place the blood from the lamb on the lintels and the doorposts, the lintel being over the top and the doorpost to either side. And the death angel would then pass over the house and not take the firstborn. Has all sorts of religious significance. And so in this event that happened, this Passover Sunday, or this Passover date, the next thing is that the Pharaoh, having lost his firstborn, and all of the people being so upset because they'd lost all their firstborn. And by the way, they were offering their firstborn as sacrifices to Moloch, to Baal. That's how they were getting the good harvest and everything else. So when God took their firstborn, they didn't have a sacrifice to give to Baal. So there is a lot of angles to the religious significance of this event. And then they set the people free. What's happening right now in America at the financial side? In this shutdown of America, this seeming death angel coming over America, the shutdown of all the jobs, the stopping of commerce, this, big pause in the way things go. We just brought the money back home. We're telling the Federal Reserve we went down to zero interest rates. We're not paying you to manage our currency anymore. What's next on the list? How was the debt to the Federal Reserve being paid? Through the income taxes going to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, is a Puerto Rican corporation. Get over it. You want to argue with me? Go do your research. Courts have found. Okay. How are they financing debt? How are they paying people? How are they doing all this stuff? They're doing that by increasing the debt. That's why Congress constantly has to increase the debt ceiling. They're doing it and then charging us interest on it, and the interest is going to pay the national debt. What's the debt to? The Federal Reserve. What's the Federal Reserve? Private banking cartel, the bloodline families, hidden in plain sight. How do they get their 800-foot yachts and aircraft and everything else? Because they're just bleeding it off you. You're working for them. Your taxes aren't going to take care of your retirement. There's nothing there.
Correct.
And so they've got you scammed. Those beautiful leaders that are behind President Trump, that have been involved in the preparation all the way back to MacArthur era, and have had a couple of shots and failed attempts, and now we're in the big one.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a war to regain, recapture, bring back home under American, born, bred here in America for real, not fakes, not false leaders who are creations, artificial creations by these bloodline families running their intelligence agencies right here in plain sight. CIA, MI6, Mossad, German intelligence, everybody, all the intelligence agencies. Running North Korea like a branch office, running Saudi Arabia like a branch office, Brennan being the station chief in Saudi Arabia before he comes over here and becomes director. The guy who created Obama's false history and was managing that, and his false school narrative and managing that, and gets rewarded with being made director of CIA. Hope Gitmo's got a super nice padded cell for you, Brennan. The reality is that we're seeing in this silent war the takedown of all of those persons, personages, institutions that have been controlling us. This dark moment, this Passover period that we're coming into right now, symbolically is this moment before we start leaving Egypt. And it's not a one-day journey. Getting out from under slavery to all these people. America's in this death thrall, this dark angel overhead. It is a spiritual war. It's a very serious one. And these markets, what's happening in them, there's a lot of significance, a lot of duplication to what we did with Russia. On the dates, let me just kind of go through that for a second with you, just so you can kind of see what this kind of means from a date thing. 4 is the number of foundation. So when you have anything that's denominated with a 4, of 4 corners on a standard building, the 4 corners of the earth, the north, south, east, west, the wind from the 4 corners, things like that. So this 4/1 date, April Fools, they thought they had us. The hinge moment being this 31-3, this 13 either way, that saloon door, double hinge door. We got through the 10 days that were all their occult days, and they thought they had one more shot at getting us and thought we were snookered by their 10-day little window. Now we come into our 10-day window. So everything for this presidency, for the remainder of this term, is built off of the foundation that's going to be starting tomorrow. And that 10-day period, 4/1, is this foundation day. 4/2 is an extremely important day also. Within the occult, and you see it all over Hollywood TV commercials, it's absolutely stunning. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. They have this ceremony called Breaking the 8. It's an occult ceremony, and what it amounts to is that in a Breaking the 8 ceremony, they break the veil between the spiritual world and the physical world, and then people are able to go into the spiritual world to get information, guidance, power, etc. And the demons are able to come over into the physical world and to interact with people and to move freely. It gives them permission. So they're constantly breaking the veil. You'll see it like in the music videos where a glass is shattered, a mirror,
Right.
all sorts of symbology that's used, but it's this breaking the veil symbology to allow the demonic interaction into the physical world. So you'll see it in numbers a lot of times because you'll see a double 4. You'll see a 4-2. You'll see it, it has to do with this pattern that the sun traces out across the earth over the course of a year. It looks like a figure 8. It's this infinity sign, which, by the way, the Toyota emblem, you're just looking at it on end, but it's an infinity sign. This hourglass type of a look that's lined out. That's this breaking the 8 thing. And some of the people, I think Bass is one of them that's done over at
Heyman Capital.
No. I'm thinking of
actually Kyle Bass?
No, I'm not talking about Kyle Bass and the financial stuff. I'm talking about over in the Hollywood side. Saturn, Eye of Saturn or whatever productions. I'll have to get it and send you a link. He does a lot of stuff on the Breaking the 8 stuff. He's, does great work breaking down the symbology of these music videos and commercials, TV commercials, and showing how they have this, underlying very deep symbolic meaning. But this date of April 2nd, that's a 4-2 date. In this case, it's about mending that rift and sealing it up so that the demons can't walk freely in our world and they can't work and act unhindered in our world. And so this breaking the 8 ceremony for them in this particular period is about mending it back together. So April Fools, this 3-ring circus we're in from 4-1, this foundation, who's the fools? All those people that didn't see this coming, that didn't understand what President Trump was doing. He's a great showman. He's running a 3-ring circus. Energy, the religious side, leading the country into a national day of prayer, and the finance stuff, moving the Treasury operations back into the U.S. He and the generals behind him in this military intelligence operation are recapturing the flag and taking control of the operation. April Fools, they're going to have a laugh on them, and so are the rest of us eventually. So then 4-2, sealing up their access to spiritual energy, power, whatever way you want to say it, the demonic power. These wizards, their magic wands are being broken. Look at what's happening in Hollywood. Why is it called Hollywood? I've told your audience before.
Because the Hollywood is the wood that's used by the wizard wand or staff.
Mm-hmm. Wood from the holly tree is the most powerful wood of all. The most powerful wands are made from the holly tree wood. So holly wood. So when you think that it's all benign and it's just, whatever, you're looking at a religion hiding in plain sight, not just in Washington, D.C., but all across the country. I mean, right there in New York, what do you have? You have the statue of Isis right out there at the edge of the city.
Yep.
Okay. Who gave that to us? It's Masonic gift, and we built a great memorial. We have an idol to Isis right there in your city. God bless America. Which God?
Exactly.
So Hollywood with its wands, these wizards, they're being broken and smashed. The rift between hell and our country is being sealed back up. That's this 4-2 date. And the events that happen on these dates will mimic that 4-1, 4-2 symbology of 3-30 or 31-3. I think we'll see some things happen that are hinges in beginning that operation, this change of stance, how we're going after this COVID thing, and how the states and federal government respond to everything and tighten up. The next date is 4-3, April 3rd. Well, 4 times 3 is 12. what's the number of the sons of Jacob that became the 12 families that comprise the nation of Israel, that came out of slavery, that came out of Egypt? The 12 sons of Jacob lived in Egypt, went there during great famine, and then stayed. And then over time, Joseph, their brother, who became the ruler in Egypt after he went there as a slave, his brother sold him into slavery. When he was there ruling under Pharaoh in Egypt, he was highly revered because he made Egypt the wealthiest nation on the planet by far during this famine, brought all the wealth to Egypt. And the people were great. But then over time, the pharaohs forgot how they got there. Joseph was forgotten in all of this. And so they became slaves. They were enslaved in Egypt. And that's this whole moment in time. That's the symbology, even from the Cube Project, slaves no more. Well, what was the last great plague? This Passover plague, when the firstborn of all these various families was taken. We're in that Passover period right now. There's a symbology that's intended to be understood out across the country with what's happening. Even the correlation to the book of Esther, because what was the commandment that went out? Persia itself was a captured operation. Haman kept the king of Persia drunk and kept him involved in his various beauty contests and sex, parades and things, always tied up, one party after another. They wanted to keep him plied with alcohol, always drinking with them, best buddies and hanging out, and everybody coming back and having a party continuously. Because while he's drunk, while he's distracted by the girls, he's handing off power to Haman and his associates to run the country. And while Haman's running things, he's plotting the destruction of the Jewish people, this other immigrant group in Persia. And so the book of Esther is about this flip, this turning, this two-way double-hinged door, saloon door, where everything was planned out to wipe out the Jews on a certain day. And then suddenly the whole thing flips, it boomerangs, it goes the other direction. And Haman ends up being impaled on his own petard. He'd had a gallows built for Mordecai, this Jew, and he was going to be impaled. And of course, impaled meant this thing up the rectum, and you would literally die a very painful, relatively slow death, hanging on this petard. It wasn't a gallows in the sense that we think of today with a noose. And instead, you can read the book. Haman ends up dying in his own death machine. But beyond that, it wasn't over on that date. Most people miss that the Purim period wasn't ended when Haman died. There was still 6+ months until this date where there was going to be a purge, where it was going to be lawful to have it out once and for all. And so the king beforehand, the Jews weren't able to defend themselves, get arms. They couldn't make allies. Anybody that helped them against being killed themselves would be killed, and all of their goods plundered. What the king did when he realized what was going on, what he'd been snookered into allowing to happen in his captured operations of kingdom, he couldn't reverse a law. So he had to amend it. And he said, okay, well, the Jews can protect themselves too, and they can make alliances, and anybody that helps them is not breaking the law. And then they had set it up to have a national purge day. Everybody have it out in one day, pick a side, and that's the day. And that was still 6+ months out. This period of time that we're in right now, this hinge day at 3/31/3, and the events of this next 10 days, April 1st through 10th, the 10th being the sunset of the Passover day. We still have, after these Hamans are picked up, and I'm going to say that we're going to see the first of the significant arrests, I believe, this week. Have I said that before? Yes, I thought there was other dates that were there, but I think this one's a pretty good probability.
Lines
So we'll
up.
see.
I mean, what better time than this?
Yeah, and so, but we'll see. I'm not telling you bet the farm on it. I'm not asking any money out of anybody. I'm not freaking making bets. I'm just telling you that I think that with everything at stake, we've seen a lot of things happen. But if you're going to start taking out these agency heads and some of the other people that are involved in some of these horrible things, we've seen the institutional control coming back home with this moving of management of our currency back under Treasury authority. Something approaching a lawful administration. It's far from done. There's a long path here, but the direction, the momentum is underway to return these things home. The oil price dropping, taking the energy control out of Saudi Arabia and all those groups and people that have been administering it for their benefit, collapsing Saudi Arabia. I told you we were going to have a coup in Saudi Arabia, and that was 18 months before the events of October 2017. Nailed it, didn't I, V?
Yeah, you did.
Remember that?
Yep.
I did. I said be 18 months to 2 years. I said it on your show and numerous other ones before we saw this coup, and it started then. And, at the end of the day, very evil. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. And we were talking about things in Saudi Arabia and experiences both of us had. And he said, his first experience with Saudi Arabia, his brother was the chief engineer. We've talked about getting the water out of the oil because of the oil that they get there has
the Gawar well.
Water content. Yeah. And so he was the chief engineer in charge of that extraction separation process for the water here from the American side. So his first experience in Saudi Arabia when he went over, he had what we call a Halliburton case. And it's a particular type of briefcase, has a very specific look, very valuable. He kind of knew that you were dealing with a Halliburton person. And as he gets off the plane, they have a young kid there, along with the, various royalty and people to meet the plane and wait for him. And so he's walking off with his briefcase, and they've got a suitcase, and they're grabbing it to go with him. And so this kid's there to take his briefcase, and he's coming down from the plane, walking away from the plane back to the terminal. And it's hot, it's a desert environment. And the kid tripped a little bit on something that was there and dropped the briefcase and dented it on the corner.
Right.
Before my friend's brother, and they're both very big oil people in their own ways, before he could even say a thing, he so that dented, big deal. It's an aluminum case, it's valuable. Get another one, not even an issue. Before he could say a thing, the commander of the guard that was there receiving them walked over to the kid, pulled a scimitar out of his belt, this very specific type of a sword to that region, pulled the scimitar out of his belt and chopped the kid's arm off immediately.
Get out of here.
Hands the kid his arm, get out of here. With his remaining hand, he has to run off with his arm.
Holy crud.
Then, it's just briefcase. They get another one. Crap, they give them out like chocolates. This is the mentality that was promoted, that was made our core ally, basis for the dollar. The way that they treat women, enslave them. One of the other things, I was talking with a friend of mine who's a SEAL Team 8 member the other day. We were talking about something related. Well, actually, I take it back. It was a gal who was a maintenance engineer a helicopter. So she got off a helicopter, broke somewhere, and they had to fix it and get it out of a difficult location. She'd parachute in, fix it, and they'd fly it back out if they could, or destroy it. Very unusual for a woman to have that position, mechanical genius. And so in Afghanistan, and anybody that served over there knows what I'm talking about here. The women are very remote. You can't get the women to engage with the guys at all. Not because they wouldn't want to necessarily, but because if they even look slightly crosswise at the Americans, the male soldiers, they'll get the crap beat out of them at home. Second the Americans aren't in sight anymore. They are very apprehensive to even make a tiny move that might be construed as having paid any deference to any other man type of thing outside of their little clan. But for this woman, wasn't seen the same way, and so the women would be very effusive with her and give her great gifts and wanted to honor her. They just, it wasn't an anti-American thing. In other words, it was the male-female thing that was the problem there for the women to engage, in any kind of conversation with the men or like that, because it's a very repressive environment. It's a very dark environment. Those parts of the world, the women, very repressed. And so, from an American standpoint, we, even from a Christian standpoint, we honor women and include them in the conversation, make them part of things, value their input and, promote them, etc. May not be perfect, but it's a far sight better than it has been in those locations, and it's improving yet. So these dark countries like Saudi Arabia, not really things that we want to promote or be close to, but they have suited a particular clan, particular people, because they could be managed behind the scenes, and outsiders couldn't participate. You couldn't know all the inner workings. Our dollar's been tied to that crowd over there in Saudi Arabia all this time. It is right now being collapsed with the low oil prices. We almost took out Texas when we took out the oil pricing around the world and collapsed the Soviet economy.
Correct.
We brought it down and we hurt Texas terribly. We had to bring in all sorts of other industry to help keep Texas afloat while we were sinking the Soviet economy. The great Satan, this evil empire, as Reagan put it. And so we're in a war right now. We're doing something similar. We're breaking the back of these people that have been controlling us externally as a nation. And it's been slow coming on. The dates and numbers and how soon things were going to happen has been this, evolving thing. Because if the president come out and said everything early on, people to, rioted, not understanding the bigger game plan, what's at stake and why we're doing this. But we're going to take out those political leaders. One thing that, just also, for example, with the Soviet Union, when we started buying the currency, the ruble, out of Russia, we would pay a little bit more for people that were supporters in the Yeltsin crowd. And we would buy less by volume and less by value from the people that were related to Gorbachev. So we picked a winner. Over time, the Yeltsin people had more to pay off in bribes. They had more Western cash to buy politicians to their side to do things. Then when we sold the currency back in and started flooding it with rubles, we did the same thing. We preferred, in the way that we did that, the Yeltsin side of the crowd. Over time and cumulatively, the Gorbachev people lost power. It was a process. It was a silent war. And Gorbachev had to walk away. The wall came down. The Soviet Empire collapsed. The satellite states were loosened from this central grip. And we see now with Putin and everything else, there's been this ongoing thing that the remainder of that war was not fought correctly. And it, we didn't secure those wins correctly. And so we never, the Russians and us here in America are natural allies. We were allies. They helped save us as a country, as a republic early on.
Correct.
And they became targets of these globalists who didn't want Russia to assist, and they were also a Christian nation.
Right. I mean, it was the British,
Orthodox.
It was the British, the French, and the Germans that have been doing their deed with the Russians. And I mean, it's crazy when you go back and you study the history. You look at how the Russians were defending Christians, even up into the height of the Ottoman Empire, when they were about to invade the Ottoman Empire. And guess who comes running to the rescue? It's, of course, going to be France, Germany, and England. It's the same globalist players over and over again. We've seen this also going back even to the whole Crimea issue, going back in the early 1900s. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Until they finally took out the Tsar, put in their globalist, non-Russian Bolsheviks, who are not ethnic Russians at all, to go ahead and run Russia. It's crazy.
Well, and so this war that we're in right now is just a continuation of a war that's been going on for a long time. Fortunately, before they were able to seal the deal, if you will, because had Hillary Clinton gotten office, a lot of things that they had planned, even this monetary plateau with the markets, they'd have switched us into their cryptocurrencies. They'd have switched us into digital currencies that favored them, and we'd be lost forever. We would not have been able to break that Tholian grip on us in the way that we were controlled in the markets. It'd have gone into a digital landscape. They own all the computers. They own all the biggest processing stuff. You'd never get free of it. So this moment with President Trump was really the last opportunity for those military insiders, this intelligence group that had been working a plan for decades to get a shot to retake control of the republic, to reverse the coup going all the way back to Kennedy and before. It was the last moment, really, that we had to pull this off. And so we're in the midst of this endeavor to recapture control of our country before it was finally too late and they had sealed control essentially permanently, because you would never get free of it. And the magnitude of what we're having to do to reverse this is pretty big. The things that have yet to be done are pretty big. Is it all over when we start getting back to work over the next few weeks and months and getting the country back on track? No. Just like after Haman was hung out there in the king's courtyard next to Harem Girl House, then there was this 6 months of everybody knew it was coming. The Jews made alliances. They had Haman's estate, all the money from his estate, to build out their protections, to buy the armaments, to protect themselves, to create block watch parties, and to make sure that the neighbors were on board with them, the other business people, etc. And Haman's 10 sons made alliances also, because anybody that was with them, if they killed a Jew, or anybody that was helping the Jews, they could have anything that they had, estate, etc. Take the kids as slaves if you want to kill them, either way. So they were highly motivated. And even before you got to the Purge Day. Hollywood loves their Purge movies. Well, it's based on the Book of Esther. So this Purge date was still out in the future after Haman was killed. And the whole kingdom was on edge because everybody was making alliances, being bought up, and then were alliances changing? Were the alliances secure? There was even this kind of James Bond moment. If some guy actually had everything lined up perfectly, the Purge date was just the date when it wouldn't be illegal to have this fight, to kill each other off, to engage. You were free to have it out, and you weren't going to jail afterwards. You weren't being punished or killed for, murder. But before that, if you did, then, if you got caught, you got, killed for murdering or something like that, or stealing. The justice was still in play, but it doesn't mean nothing happened after Haman was killed up until the Purge Day. There was secret agent stuff going on. There was maneuvering. There was, you got to take out that business. You can't do business with that guy. There was tension in the streets. We have 6 months after we start to come out of this thing here with this Resurrection Passover week ahead, next week. We have 6 months after that till the election. And 6 months and 22 days after the 12th Easter day. There's a lot at stake. And this is far from over. And we have it out on election day, one side or the other. Trump or, Bernie, Trump or Biden, or whoever else they want to put in there. You want to go back to the system that we've had all this time and return power to the Rockefellers and all of their, buddies and friends, people, the bloodline families that have been running the planet all along? Or do you want to try to set out afresh and go to the promised land and get free of this stuff? We're leaving Egypt. And I think that the important feature for people to understand is that Trump is not Moses, but this is a Moses type moment. We need to collectively decide we're leaving slavery and we're going to get control of our country back, and we're going to head out. This Esther moment to be free once and for all of the people that, give us the sneer and the sideways glance because we feel we want to function as patriots. And so on these numbers, going back to where I was at with the numbers, the next number in this sequence is 444, April 4th. Okay, well, what's April 4th? Again, it's this foundation number. It's more than just foundation, though, because when you're 4 times 4, that's also the roof over the head. It's a box. It's a square. Well, what we're doing is we're boxing up these people for them with the numbers. 4 times 4 is 16. The other side of the coin is 16 is code for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's the address for the White House. It's generally the way that they refer to stuff in this gematria, this secret language of numbers. The 16 refers to activities aimed at or originating at the White House and with the president. So we had a picture of the president. He was sitting out on the portico of the White House out there on the patio. And beside him, behind him, over on the grass, was a little cage, like a bunny rabbit type cage. And you didn't really notice it because it's green like the rest of the lawn. The president's free to move around there at the White House. He's the one that's got power and control and is happening. So the 16 works both ways. The 16, in the case of the crowd that's in a box, they're being boxed up right now. That's what this 4-4 is all about. And that's 16. So he's free and they're getting boxed up. There's lots of meaning to each one of the numbers all the way up through the 10th. But the 10th, the other thing about the 10th, you drop the 0 in gematria. So it's back to 4-1. It completes this cycle 4-1 through 4-10, which is really just a 4-1 again. It's the other end of the box, the bigger box. So it's the 4-square foundation base, and it's the lid going on top of the box, the 4-10, which is just 4-1. And that's the lid on the box. And we've completed this phase of the action. I think that what they're going to do is they're going to take these agency heads, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, some of their functionaries, McCabe, Stroke, other people, some of these people into power, without putting anybody saying too much. We know that certain of these players that are in the crosshairs with the actions to begin legal action against these people that ran the coup have set up what amounts to war rooms in their house, and they're monitoring every single thing related to the Q operations and people discussing the Q, the Q statements, etc. And there's
Hey,
a lot
Toby,
of
real quick, I just want to let you know, you already know this, but the audience might not. The entire board of 8chan, I think in the last month or two, has been put on a DoD server to protect it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you had the president on the stage, when he was giving that interview about they were doing the town hall about the coronavirus thing, he had that cage in the background. It was a rabbit cage.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that people in the Q movement, especially Q, has been saying is follow the white rabbit. Look at the molecular structure, and I have it pulled up on the screen. Follow the white rabbit. What is this? Adrenochrome. When you look at adrenochrome, it looks like a white rabbit. And look at where it was manufactured. Wuhan, China. Date of manufacture, 7/17, 2018. 7/17. Go ahead, W.
Well, the palindrome 17 again.
Yep.
And it's a saloon door hinge. It can go either direction. Is it for victory for our side or enslavement for them? Remember, by the way, what's the imprint over President Kennedy's grave? It's a Q. When you look at the sidewalk around it and the entrance, yes, it's a great big huge Q. Why? Because the power of the Kennedy presidency was sealed in place. 17 is the number of Osiris. They sealed that energy in place with a great big huge Q to entrap that power. What do witches do in a satanic ceremony? When they're going to invoke the power of demons, when they're going to do a spell and invoke demonic energy, demons to go do something, they have to conjure up these demons. So the first thing the witch does, or the wizard, is they draw a circle on the ground around them. The circle is to keep that demonic energy from getting them, to protect them from the demons, because they're have death in them. And so if the witch was to step outside that circle, was to move outside that circle, they themselves would be a victim of whatever it is that they've conjured up. So they stay inside the circle, and they put other symbols inside the circle to further have power, etc. So what do you have going around Washington, D.C.? Yeah, it's a big circle. What do you have going around Washington, D.C.?
Right, and
it's
a pentagram.
Big circle. And then you've got stuff going on with all the symbology inside the circle. You've got one great big huge occult city, a snake winding its way down through the middle of the city in the buildings. There's lots of stuff. You can just do a search engine, look at occult Washington, D.C. and see all sorts of stuff. You'll learn a lot. But then you come back to the Kennedy grave. So they're doing the same thing. They're also sealing in that power. It can go either way. The 17 flipping around the other direction is the Osiris in favor of the 17 in favor of Osiris's side, or we recapturing and reversing that energy and magic. We're not doing occult things. We're not wizards in the same sense. We're not trying to mimic them. and be good white magic wizards. We're just bringing back the original meaning and understanding and values. We're breaking their energy, stopping it, and moving forward as a country. And that's the theme within this Q community. The military intelligence people that are running it behind the scenes. And we're bringing back control to actual Americans, not these globalists managing us like a captured operation, if you will. And so out through these dates, whereas they want us to do an occult worship, Ishtar, fertility goddess, spring goddess, Isis thing on Easter Sunday with bunny rabbits, etc. The real thing is this is about a resurrection event, and we can choose which side we want to be on for the remainder of this year up to the purge day. Are you with Haman and his sons? Haman, are you upset that Haman was hoisted on his own petard on the gallows that he created to hang the good guys on? They were going to destroy us. The financial markets, they were going to destroy us. Your dollar wasn't going to be worth anything by the time Hillary got through. They had a plan. They were going to wipe the dollar out. When that market hit 29,000 and change at that plateau, that was the marker where they were going to switch into their digital currencies. This creation of the Bitcoin and everything else with this digital currency, that was all managed behind the scenes by CIA people. It was all gamed out on computers. They had a plan for doing that and had it in place for a very long time. I know I'm going to hurt a lot of the crypto people, and they're all upset with me because I'm saying this, and I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. The whole point is, who has the biggest computers on the planet? Who runs them? Who owned it before they ever got there? Let's go back to Facebook. Who created the platform that became Facebook?
That was Mark Zuckerberg. He was a college boy in Harvard, and he dropped out, and he stole the idea from the Winklevoss twins.
He's as much a Zuckerberg as Clinton is a Franken.
He's another Rockefeller, isn't he?
Yeah, come on, give me a fucking break. He's a Rothschild.
Oh yeah, Rothschild.
Yeah. So the whole point is that you know, yeah. So he's the whole thing is that he was just the anointed one to be the sock puppet to handle that phase of the operation. And then what was the rest of the story? They bled some money off for the twins. What did the twins buy with a tiny portion of their money? They bought a bunch of Bitcoin. Then they handled the computer stuff and they ran it to outer space. It's all bullshit. You're looking at stories, scams, just as much as Obama was a creation of Brennan. These people were creations of the same team, and they were being used as figureheads to prepare us to accept, to have a history for what they were going to do in how they changed the way that money was created and used out through the economy. And it would have gone into this digital netherworld where you would never, ever get control of it back. You would be slaves forever. At the last possible moment, a chink has been thrown into the armor. They've got a dent. The cogs aren't working quite right. And we're in this fight. We have a tough fight for the next 6 months. Anybody that thinks that this is going to be over with the coronavirus, we're going to get back to work, it's all going to be smooth, get your head out of your ass. Wake the fuck up. Do you understand this is for everything? You're worried about your retirement? You're going to get your retirement back. Look at what Trump's doing. He's going to move manufacturing that was artificially pushed out of the country by bought and paid for congressional action by a bunch of dupes that paid companies to move our industrial base offshore to China and Asia and to other countries, to move the basis for the valuation of our dollar offshore to Saudi Arabia and the control of the value of the dollar offshore. Hey, by the way, Kissinger, let's talk about that. So Kissinger helped to engineer the fix with Saudi Arabia for the oil crisis in the early 70s, mid 70s. Okay, where was Kissinger 2 weeks before the coronavirus release?
China.
There you go. And what was he doing? He had all the big U.S. company heads and China heads there. All in red, we're going to have the pandemic.
We are going to study the pandemic.
Yeah.
I will also eat bat soup and have a new world order with my bat soup.
Look, this crowd behind the scenes. Remember, what was Rockefeller, or what was Kissinger's history? He was personal aide to David Rockefeller. Worked out of Rockefeller's offices there in New York. He, got sent on the various missions. He miraculously gets to be the advisor, all these things. By the way, when the Bilderbergs had their little meeting, when Hillary and Obama were duking it out back in 2008 over who was going to get to be the Democratic nominee, and it was still a toss-up either way, the Bilderbergers had a meeting there in Maryland, and about 500 people showed up for it. And for the first 2 days, Hillary and all of her people made the presentation about why she should win the candidacy and be the candidate for the Democratic Party. Then for the second 2 days, Obama and his people made their case for why he should be the nominee. And then they had their little secret conclave meeting of the senior elders, and then the overall group voted, and they decided that it was going to be Obama. And after that, Hillary never threw any more hard stones. She backed down. They told her she's going to get state, and the rest was history. They didn't. The decision was made behind the scenes. Who was it that presided over that Bilderberg meeting that chose whether it was going to be Obama or Hillary that became the candidate in 2008? Henry Kissinger. Who else was present? George Bush Sr. and others. All this 322 crowd, all this this Skull and Bones crowd, the Masons, the Bloodlines, everybody that had a piece of the pie. They're all in on this. We're fighting a group of globalists whose interests are who gets to own the planet. Look at the Georgia Guidestones. What's it say?
A population of 500 million.
Yeah, they want a global population of 500 million. So that would be 13 out of every 14 people on the planet right now would have to die. There's approximately 7 billion people on the planet. So who gets to pick which 13 people to kill and who gets to remain? They want their bloodlines, their families to remain. They believe that if they deindustrialize the planet, that they can have the planet's technology has reached a point where they can sustain themselves very nicely, and they don't need all of us dirtying up the planet. They want us gone, and the technology exists. They can run the planet on 500 million people and do just fine. And the robotics becomes the predominant thing. And by the way, in the whole Isis legend, where she reconstitutes her son, makes a stone dildo and has sex with it, and has them going, what's the stone? What is it? It's artificial. What do they want? An artificial intelligence, artificial body. They believe that they can have a silicon existence where they can transfer consciousness into their silicon creations and live forever. That's what this is all about in this very, very long-term, twisted, warped mindset that these people come from. And it's very satanic. It's very evil. By the way, who founded who gave the property for the UN? Nelson Rockefeller. Who pushed for it and made it all happen? Nelson and David Rockefeller engineered that whole thing with all the meetings to come up with a grand UN thing. What was happening back at the Korean War? These globalists were trying to form out how we do stuff as a policing country, sacrifice our troops in this stupid little foreign thing. What did MacArthur and his people do? They jumped around all of these obstacles that were artificial and put in their place, put in their way. And these reporting systems that let the UN know where they were going to be, what they were doing next, that were informing the Chinese behind the scenes. And started to actually go win the war.
Yep.
And because MacArthur wasn't obeying Truman, wasn't doing what the president wanted in letting these globalists run our military remotely so they could keep this thing going, he was taken out of position of authority. Why? Because he was actually working to save lives and get the war over and done with. That wasn't the way they wanted it done.
Right.
Why do they hate Trump so badly?
Is that, W, real quick, you want to touch base on that real quick? So from when the generals figured out that the UN was pretty much giving away our positions to the Chi-Coms and the North Koreans during the Korean War, and they figured out, hey, you know what, let's just stop reporting back to the UN where the heck our troops are moving, because every time our troops move, we're getting ambushed. They started giving them false intel, and then they quickly realized that, to their own confirmation, that the UN is filled with a bunch of dirty bastards, a bunch of globalist scumbags. At what point did those generals run to the one and only Howard Hughes and really kick off where this movement began?
Well, it's
I don't know if you want to talk about that or just...
It's probably too involved to do.
I
could probably spend 4 hours on it. And I know that someone has been talking about that here recently, and I actually coached that person on some of this, and it's not coming through in translation quite correctly, but still good people and doing good work in their own zone. But the Hughes connection to all of this is amazing. And that I have stuff there that's I know what I'm talking about when I get to this.
Without a doubt.
Personal. Okay.
Without a doubt.
Is there any question?
There's no question.
Give you the proof? Okay.
None. I've seen it like right there. You and I were sitting in California when you pulled it out and showed it on the desk. Like, boom, there it is. Right. This is the fact.
And it was just,
holy shit.
Yeah, it's about 1/10,000th of
and we were all freaked out. It was you, me, one of the biggest gold traders on the planet, and two other guys. And we were just sitting there on the coffee table. We're in the lobby, and when you pull that thing out, man, we're just like everybody's jaw hit the floor. So you know the deal.
Fake that.
You can't fake that. You can't fake that. But I don't know who he is. What's his educational background? This guy W. What did he do before? If I. What? How does he know all this? I don't. Does he have a LinkedIn profile?
Well, anyway, so the long and short of it is that it's a very involved, complex discussion. But when MacArthur, it wasn't. They knew what was happening. They just were trying to get around it. When he did Inchon, he didn't let Washington and the White House know what he had in mind, and kicked the Chinese in the ass and changed the course of the war. They didn't want that. They wanted this war to drag out, like they wanted Vietnam to drag out, because it was part of their globalist plans to weaken us and to enrich their particular players. From a satanic perspective, they need these continuous blood sacrifices out of chaos. Order. They need the chaos of conflict. They need the chaos of wars. They need the chaos. You go to the James Bond movies and they talk about this. There's countries going down, blah, blah, blah. And we now have 160,000 women in the sex trades. Why? Because of the chaos from the war. They've moved these women into sex trade. Very mercenary. Very satanic. The conflicts in Asia. What was Aaron Swartz doing when he was downloading data in that data closet over at MIT? He could have downloaded the whole the whole Cambridge library on one hard drive. But he didn't. He had 20 of them. Why did it take so long? The thing that he was arrested for is he's stealing data out of the Cambridge library. Bull fucking shit. Wasn't at all what he was doing. He was getting all of the, computers for children over in Cambodia and the whole schmear there. Bullshit. They were getting sex tapes and profiles of the kids that they were freaking selling out of Asia.
That's connected to MIT. That also links up with Keith Rainier from Nexium.
Yeah, Keith Rainier. Well, I mean, Epstein and the whole bunch there,
Yep.
but that was being run through MIT. Who was the one that went over there and supervised when
Former MIT professor.
Well, Queen Sihanouk had become aware of what was going on up there, and the sex trafficking, the child trafficking, and so she sent the police chief from Phnom Penh and several of his key people to go get a handle on what was going on and get ready to raid that whole thing and stop it. So who goes over early in his appointment, after his appointment as head of the FBI, to Cambodia to find out what's going on and have a courtesy trip, whatever? Mueller.
Yep.
And then as soon as Mueller's done his little thing, is coming back, the helicopter with the chief of police crashes with all of his key aides coming back from that very city. Darn. And then everything stops. Aaron Swartz, he commits suicide because he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life, over this Cambridge data thing that anybody could have.
And it was in the jail cell too, Dub. It was
well, and he supposedly committed suicide out on the street. He didn't do it in jail cell, but the whole thing is they were going to send him to jail forever. It's kind of like the Flynn thing; they're going to send him to jail forever. And then now we find out nothing of what was accused had any basis in truth. It's common to, just because somebody is charged with something or there's a filing that says something, doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true or not. You can file anything you want. The ham sandwich accosted me. Well, is it true? Well, then you find out the other side, you do the other things, follow the rest of the court. What's the outcome of the case? Oh, yeah. Unanimous, not guilty. Oh, yeah. We gave the kid back to that parent because the mom was so full of shit because she was being managed by, CPS or something, people to say it because that knows what the court's like, whatever. You find out after the fact that these things are completely false. But some people will never go back, forever. They're going to want to talk about Trump was impeached, even if we reverse the impeachment. No, Trump was impeached. Trump was impeached. Trump was impeached. Well, what ended up being the truth of the matter? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He was impeached. The same thing with Flynn. No, he was a traitor. He was treasonous. He was guilty. He was guilty. He's guilty. He's guilty. Well, he wasn't convicted, and the allegations turned out to be completely false. In fact, they were made up. In fact, they were engineered. In fact, these people had a plan to take him out because he was the most critical asset to the president coming into this administration with the information about who was involved in what and where the bodies were buried. So all of a sudden, we find out the other picture. But to those people that are bought and sold, dyed in the wool liars that want to take sides with the Haman crowd, and then when Haman's hung on his own petard for being an ass, and because he was going to take it out, and he ends up dying on the gallows that he himself built, you got to pick a lane. You're going to back that up. Haman's 10 sons are out telling, they had my dad killed. They took all of his estate. They stole everything. Well, okay, we got 6 months ahead of us after the resurrection day, and everybody's going to have to pick a side, pick a lane, good or evil, heavenly path or hellish path. And if you want to side yourself with Haman and his 10 sons, Haman's dead, his 10 sons, they think they're going to win. We're going to have a purge day and we'll find out. This fight isn't over. We got a lot ahead of us. People need to get their minds in the right phase and then understand, are we actually just headed for Easter Sunday with candies and fertility eggs for the goddess Ishtar, Isis, Eoster, whatever you want to call it? Is this all about the bunny rabbits and adrenochrome? Or is that what you're going to celebrate? Because that's the crowd that has captured this celebration, that wants to own this Easter to take away the real symbology about resurrection. Slaves no fucking more.
Mm-hmm.
And get us to a new way of living. Or which path are you going to be on? What way are you going to celebrate it? You're going to do it the occult way? You're going to worship those occult methods and systems? Are you in the financial markets going to whine and cry because the Fed's getting kicked in the ass and the market had to come down and some of that energy had to be bled out so that we could get it redirected and move back under U.S. control, under American voters' administration, so that we can have this period. By the way, you're not going to pick up all the people on those sealed indictments in a day or two effectively. So what are you going to be doing? First off, what's been happening over the last couple of weeks? We've been in a war. Nobody even knows about it down in Honduras.
Yeah.
We're taking out the MS-13 leadership, just like we took out the leadership of the Jalisco gang down in Mexico, picked up all 27 of the cartel heads. It was like picking up Escobar, Ochoa, and El Chapo
Right.
all at the same time. And then we pick up 700 gang members across the country. Not the guy that was stealing it on the street corner, to the guy in the car. We're talking about the guys that were running the drug houses all across the country, that were killing people, that were managing that drug flow into the country, which was dangerous because why? That's where the fentanyl's coming in at. You want to talk about a way to distribute a killer biological agent into the country in mass in days. Introduce it through corrupted drugs. The fentanyl coming out of China being ran by the Chicoms through these Mexican gangs being run by the Chinese who are handling the money laundering and the guns and everything else that are remotely controlling like sock puppets, these Mexican gangs. That was a direct threat to America. And we just wiped them out, cleaned them out to the walls, cut the head off and the body. Those hands and feet, those little guys on the street corners, they don't have product right now. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better for them. Probably never going to get better. We're worried about stuff in the hospitals and all that. As that drug supply out there at the street level dries up, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to have to get their heads clear and think again if they're going to be involved in that. We can change the direction of the country. MS-13's leadership that's been running things and controlling operations through the Americas and up here into America, and the threat at the street level to us to do the bidding of some of these corrupt political gangs here in the country, the corrupt administrative gangs here in the country. Their leadership is getting wiped out this second in Honduras, door to door. All of those illegals here in the United States who came here illegally from Honduras because they, are political refugees, Honduras might be a whole hell of a lot cleaner before this is all over. I can guarantee you it's going to be a lot safer for people to decide, I think I'm going back home, because we're going to clean the streets up. We're going to get the illegals that have been voting, those 160,000 sealed indictments, which in large measure relate to vote fraud by foreigners, foreign interference in our elections, which is what that executive order was from September 12th of 2018 before the election, and then the reporting to the president on December 21st by the Director of National Intelligence that I referred to in that last conversation you and I had. This is that moment where we're going to collect these people up, and we're going to give them a choice. They don't want to go back home. They want to say whatever. Well, they can stay in detention. Not going to starve to death. Nobody's dying. We're going to take care of them, give them medical care and like that. But as they see that there's options and opportunity at home, they're going to have to make a choice. And we're cleaning up Mexico right now. We're going to help Mexico where they want to be helped. The federales don't want our help because they want to keep the old way. But like the governor of Jalisco State, he's going to work with us. He wants our help. They're going to find a safer environment. They're going to want to be back home and rebuilding in their own country. And if they want to come back here, they'll come back legally. And same with Honduras and same with other countries. We're going to seal up our borders, and we're going to, people want to come here, more the merrier. But you're going to do it legally. If you want to be an American, great. If you want to just be here for working, if there's room and we need the work, we got a place for you. And if they're not, the jobs are going predominantly to Americans. And whose industry is it going to be? We're not going to export our jobs to China anymore. We're bringing that industry home, the pharmaceuticals and many other things. People that are worried, what's the economy going to be like after this?
It's going to be the best economy they've ever seen, W. The physical economy is coming back.
Amazing.
It's going to be amazing. The American Renaissance, brother. I cannot wait.
That's resurrection, back from the dead. And this is the hinge moment. That's what this saloon door 13 is all about. It can swing their way, it can swing our way. It's swinging our way now. Foundation 4-1. Foundation 4-10, drop the 0. That's the box. It's a box for them, but it's the foundation for everything moving forward for this administration and for us as a people. We're going to get things back under control, and we're going to do it from here. It still won't be over. We're in a long-term war. We didn't get fucked up like this overnight.
Correct.
And we're not going to get unfucked overnight.
Correct.
There's a lot of consequences to things that have happened here. And there's a lot of things that have to be worked through and worked out. But we're on a path, and we have to stay the course. And those people that want to hand wring and moan and groan, what is President Trump trying to do to us? Grow up, grow a pair, see what's actually going on here. Give us some room to save the country, save the future. What you were gonna make a big killing on Bitcoin, and you were gonna, I got mine. Too bad about you, because I was so smart. I saw it in advance, and I saw the future. Yeah, like Zuckerberg and his alleged former friends, enemies that invested in Bitcoin and magically are going to run the whole Bitcoin market from behind the scenes. Bull fucking shit. That was the other guy's plan. That was their way of further sealing the control. And you were going to be a participant in it. You're going to be a player in it. You were going to be used in it to gain, we're going to go wipe these other people out, but they just didn't see it coming in time. You're going to side with Haman's 10 sons. They killed our dad. They stole everything. Oh, your dad, actually, it was his plot, and he was part of this scam to rip everybody else off and, turn the nation into a bunch of looters, to take out, everybody gang up on one group.
Yeah.
Well, it turned around. That's the Esther story. If you want to hear more about that, over at Jennifer Mack, I did a presentation. It's going to be biblical, and she did a beautiful job of putting that together. It's a long presentation, but if you got time in your hands, go listen to it and give her a note. Thank her for all of, she did a lot of work, and set other things aside to do that. Space Shot 76. He did a presentation with me on the second half of the whole Esther thing. First half was over at Jennifer Mack, and the second half of the Esther thing, that time period from when Haman was killed until the Purge Day, is in that. And they're wrong. They're long. If you don't have time, you don't listen to them long. Don't. It cover a lot of stuff. So here we are now. This is what this is about. Get in the fight. Get your head out of your ass. Understand what's really at stake. And if you want to invest in the future with our team. The pharmaceutical stuff's going to come home. What are those companies that are going to begin doing our pharmaceuticals here? We don't need to do them in China. We can do them just as cheaply here. We don't have to have risk of what's going on. Remember the toothpaste that was polluted, and we're getting it out of China. It's killing people, taking their teeth out, etc. Because they don't have the right controls. Nobody caught it. Let's move our production right back home here. Come on, give me a break.
So real quick, I want to lend some balance here about the whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency thing. BTC at the core, I know a lot of the core developers who are BTC core developers. Zuckerberg, Winklevoss, Twinkie Boys, all those guys, they got in way later in the game. One of the things of BTC, when you look at BTC, Satoshi Nakamoto, the whole entire white papers and whatnot, if you look at it, it actually has some MIT fingerprints on it with some white hat. Especially if you trace it back to the original cypherpunks, going back into the 80s. The problem with the BTC community right now, and I'll tell you this from an institutional level, and one of the clients being one of the largest liquidity providers in the game, we had so much momentum going forward. What's happening right now is basically the exit doors. Like, I can get any client into BTC. BTC is a nightmare for status. It really is. For control freaks. It's a nightmare. The code gets strong. The problem is, what has happened is that a lot of the banks, like, I can get anybody into BTC, but try getting out of it. The liquidity problem of, okay, I'm in BTC. If I want to cash out, like, for instance, if you're an investor or if you're in the OTC market, the banks are controlling all the exit doors. And that right there is the modicum of control that they have. Like, you can have $1 billion in BTC, The question is, how are you going to cash out? And you
Well,
can't.
let me just say this. Remember, it's a very, very satanic thing. The BTC is Hotel California.
Meaning?
You can get in, you can check in, but you can never check out. What their plan was, this crowd that wanted Hillary in, this crowd that was engineering everybody into the Bitcoin and going to inflate it to outer space, was everybody has to go there. But once you're there, there's no exit strategy. There's no exit plan. You go digital and you never come back. Now, let me just add one thing. The basic code structure, the basic idea,
I do not, hold
there's
on. I do
value
not
there.
sell any of my BTC. I'm heavily invested in BTC. I'm ardently involved in BTC and its development at an institutional and global level. So, W and I
Yes.
have difference of opinion there. But go ahead, W.
Well, in their world, if they had won, they didn't win.
No, they didn't win. Correct, because it's an art.
Yes.
Again, you folks, this is a complicated issue. You can't have like one layer on it. W's describing an aspect to a giant ball of yarn. But go ahead, W.
So at the end of the day, am I saying that Bitcoin's going away? No.
No.
And am I saying that that the crypto scenario is going away? No. But it isn't going to be what they had in mind.
Correct.
And the basic concept of valuation based on computing power, and to be able to have records that never get destroyed as long as this stuff is out there. There's a lot of value in there that can be engineered in a very positive way. Like so many things, you can have a positive and a negative application of almost any technology. So those are conversations to be had out in the future. Yeah. But the way it was going to be used, the way it was going to be implemented, was going to be horror.
Yeah, I agree. The way, and folks, let me clarify here. Let me soften the blow a little bit so people can understand. What W is talking about is basically the original design. And I saw this from working on the institutional side. They were clamping down on Bitcoin, on the BTC core developers so hard. They were clamping down on all the institutions. Okay. I know this because I deal with the regulators on a day-to-day basis, and it is a financial and nightmare headache. Okay. They can't, like, if you're in BTC, they can't, it's hard to track you. It's hard to nail you down, so to speak. Right. It's a nightmare for these idiots. Okay. But, and they know that because the blockchain is a thing of beauty. It's a trustless system. Okay. So what happens is you get in, and before, like if you're an early adopter, you wanted to cash out. There were financial institutions that, hey, guess what? Without even providing, in some cases, KYC or AML, especially in the OTC world, over the counter, you can cash out, no issues. Okay. So it became a very powerful means of moving capital without any sort of the capital controls. It's a wonderful way for you to skirt capital controls. Now, today, unless, and I do have clients that are of high net worth, they can move things in and out and settle OTC overseas, okay? But one of you people right now, right, and this is what I'm talking about, the system and the corruption, because these idiots, they corrupt everything, and I'm talking about the cabal. They corrupt and they destroy and they corrupt everything, they spoil it. If you wanted to go on Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini, which is owned by the Winklevoss twins, right? Any one of them, go ahead and try to buy Bitcoin. Put a $10,000 order in for Bitcoin. First of all, you'd have to put a KYC, AML, left kidney, and a blood sample, and a stool sample, and your firstborn child. That's the first thing you got to give up. Second thing, they limit your orders so much. Why? Because they don't have it. They have to go get it. So they seek out other liquidity providers, other exchanges, and they have to basically try to get it from the miners and whatnot. And by the time you get it, it's already been priced up sky high, and then they sell it to you and they hit you with a premium overhead. But then, whatever you do on their stupid exchanges is tracked. If you want to cash out, it's tracked. They issue a W-9 directly to the IRS, the whole 9 yards. There are alternatives to this where you got to go through all that BS, one of which is something I'm dealing with right now and working on, and if you're interested, contact me. But my God, it is a pain in the ass if you're a U.S. citizen. And this is how the cabal's been doing. Any wonderful, beautiful thing like the blockchain, they can't fundamentally fuck with the blockchain. They can't. It's too powerful. But they can, and they have tried to limit your access to BTC and your exits to BTC. That's how they're doing it. This is starting to change as more creativity, more creative options are coming up that allows you to exit out, especially on the financial side of things. So W's not cockeying or poo-pooing BTC. He was talking about if Hillary and the cabal would have won, your access to that would have been very, very. It would have been a pain in the ass. It wouldn't be convenient. It wouldn't. The utility, the fungibility, the utility, and the adaptability would have been completely destroyed. And then they would have locked it up. Very, very difficult for you to get in and out. And then they'd eventually have their digital dollar, which they would have complete control over. You would get it because there'll be mass adoption, and they could completely control your life with that. That's basically what I wanted to put out there, some balance before somebody takes this and runs it without context. Go ahead, W.
Well, and then the other thing is that, you mentioned one other thing, the tax implications of the IRS. Okay, so what's part of the whole point? If you're going to take out the Fed and its foreign aspects move back under Treasury control, what are you going to do about the IRS? What's ahead? This amazing, glorious future that's out ahead for us as we get control of our country back and kick these globalists in the ass and send them out of here. And in the case of a large number of them here in the U.S., send them to Gitmo. We're going to get our tax structure back under control. That's the second half of this next 4 years when Trump gets back, is getting that back under control and lessening the burden on the American people in this tax that's going out by inflation, as well as this unlawful income tax. We had hearings that were scheduled for October 2001 to look at the legality of the income tax. There was enough people that had a very good understanding of what was being done here in the scam that had reached a point in the courts, etc. And finally, Congress had agreed to these hearings to go after the legitimacy of the income tax, which, by the way, you can go through the Federal Register. There is no income tax. There is no constitutional provision for an income tax. It's a voluntary tax that's enforced as though it's mandatory. It's enforced under liquor, tobacco, and firearms sections. And so there's huge arguments there. Erwin Schiff was a friend of mine, beautiful guy, died in prison, great political prisoner. His wife, Cindy Nguyen, is just a beautiful, beautiful person, knows this stuff inside out. Part of her parole out of prison was she couldn't talk about this stuff. And a brilliant mind, having some heart issues. Beautiful artist. You got to go buy a picture from her. And up there in North Texas, Central Texas. And so with that in mind, we're going to get this income tax, this inflation tax that's going to these globalist players, not just under control, but eliminated, and get America back to a sounder setting. What's America going to look like from a business standpoint when huge portions of your money and then the labors to intricately work through all the accounting to be able to pay all this money out, this lost energy just on keeping records for them to pull this off, this wasted labor for their benefit that neither spins nor toils or actually creates anything.
Correct.
From Egypt, not only do you have to make the bricks for all the Egyptian buildings, you have to gather the straw for it on top of it. You're not even provided the basics to make the stuff that you're enslaved to do. Further, weighing down the people so they didn't have time to think about what was happening to them, to even have the energy to be in the fight because they're just busy working so hard just to, keep a flow going, keep the kids in school, to, feed everybody. It's going to be a different America. If I was going to invest anywhere on planet Earth, it'd be in the future of America. Pick a lane, find a way.
I'll say this, and I'll say this without getting into too many details. Right now, 60 some odd % of BTC mining is done in China. And I'm proud to tell all of you right now that BTC mining is going to return to the United States in full force. In fact, one of the companies that I'm working with right now, my God, next generation cards, mining rate cards that are running 40% more efficient, 200% faster. And W, you're going to love this, man. Their technologies, they have a 3D printed tub, 3x10. They'll put 300 of these mining rigs into that tub. The tub is then filled completely to capacity with a dielectric fluid. That fluid does not conduct electricity. It takes away all the heat. And thanks to Donald Trump's opportunity zones, they have one in northern Illinois, of all places, where they've negotiated an electrical cost of 3 cents a kilowatt. When they are up and running, which they will be by June, okay, they'll be the largest data center as well as crypto mining operation in the Western Hemisphere. This is happening in this country. This is a rival to anything that China is doing, man. This is huge. Amazing.
Well, and again, we're going to bring lots of things back to America. The amount of jobs here is going to go up, and they're going to be higher technology jobs. People are going to be hand wringing because we're going to send a lot of illegal voters back home, or at the very least, they're going to be in detention centers here in over the next weeks and months. With that said, once they leave and want to come back, if they want to, and to do stuff, we're going to have a lot more jobs here, but they're going to be jobs that pay more, with less overhead, with higher technology.
Yep.
This deindustrialization of America that the Brits and their global warming crowd tried to foist on us to sink us like the Titanic.
Yep.
To get their way, with the leaders that were anti-Fed on the boat. They thought they were going to sink us forever in this Titanic moment, which, by the way, it went down on April 12th. I should probably do a broadcast and just talk about the Titanic, the symbology, the real event, exactly what really did happen. It's huge. The symbology of America being resurrected at this moment, this death angel passing over to stop the birthing of this next generation. See, this next generation, this firstborn, you people in this audience are the one that the bad guys were targeting. This younger crowd that was going to own America the next time around, they were going to kill you off. That was their plan. The death angel was headed for you personally. This Passover event is symbolically aimed at what the president wants you to know and understand, what the team behind the president, the power behind the throne, if you will, with what they did, the sacrifices they made, the risks they took to be here right now, to be in this fight right now. It's all aimed at this next generation, this firstborn of a new era in America. And you need to own this. You need to understand that you were the target. You need to own this and make it stick and see it through and be the ones that lead everyone around you to stop the whimpering, stop the hand wringing, grow a pair, get out there and act like an American.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay? Don't get your freaking girly girl brain out of your head and throw it out in the deepest part of the sea. Don't be neutered by these assholes who want us all to turn into, sex slaves and Baphomets. Come on, man. Get out of that. Grow up.
Yeah.
This is a critical moment. Everything we're going through right now as a nation is about saving this next generation alive to own their future. This isn't about end of the world. This isn't about hurting you and your life is so frustrated. I don't know what's going to happen to me. The guys behind this have gamed out every aspect of what's ahead. They've run it through their supercomputers hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. If we do this, what happens here? If we do that, what happens there? They've done it as a war game. How did Walmart and Facebook and Amazon come to own the world in their, because the planning for how they would take over those industries was done on military computers for the benefit of those players behind the scenes. What had they done with the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies? They had gamed it out. How do we take over the world? How do we win a war and win the control of the world? Those globalists had gamed this out. And now we have white hats, good guys that have come in. They've got control. They didn't see him coming. They tried to take him out. They did everything they could because he has the authority of the presidency. And they've been running their computers 24/7, checking every angle. You know, one of the things I've mentioned a couple of times, the toilet paper. Why was toilet paper chosen as the thing to get people to focus on?
So the morons
It
don't buy
wasn't
the other.
accidental.
No, there's a psychological thing behind that. It's they're not, number one, they're not going to hoard food, and they're buying a bulk item, so it makes it feel like they're buying something big and important. That's what what I would think.
Yeah, it's highly visible.
Yes.
You could send 15 people into a grocery store and have them buy all of it up, and they clean out an aisle in 20 minutes, and the whole aisle was bare, and you didn't even see that anybody in particular went in there. It wasn't just a one-person thing. It's highly visible for the cameras in the shopping cart, in the cars, but it's not. It's a convenience item. It's not a survival item.
Correct.
And it's not beans. It's not your insulin. It's not a medical thing. So you could get concerned, but it wasn't like you were going to starve to death or something.
Right.
And it looked great on camera, and it got people all concerned. It got them thinking about everything else that leads up to that, needing toilet paper. And so while their brain might have been on toilet paper, they were really doing the other stuff to get prepared to be at this moment in time.
Right.
Very few people that we're seeing or talking to aren't able to survive at this exact moment. The stores are still open, but they've kind of hunkered down. They've got the basics to get through. We're going to have it's going to seem a lot worse over the next week and a half, even, before we really start to turn the corner. I think when people look back, they will see this 31-3 as the hinge day. Everything darkest before the dawn, and then we're moving the other direction. The one thing I started to mention earlier, the Ezekiel, with these people, the angel took Ezekiel and showed him this woman in the outer court of the Holy of Holies, the temple, the synagogue in Jerusalem. And this woman was worshiping Tammuz, crying because Tammuz had fallen to hell. And this was a Israelite girl, a Jewish girl, and she's crying for Tammuz. Well, Tammuz was this god from Babylon. Her husband was Isis, and she had him thrown into hell so she could be free.
Right.
As a price for her to leave hell, she had to put somebody else there in her place. So she puts her own husband there because he was enjoying life too much, and she was mad at him. So then he says, but there's something worse than that. If you come into the inner court, here are the priests of Jerusalem. And there is the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy of Holies, the seat of God. And they have their back to God. and they're bent over, showing them their backside, showing God their backside, and they're facing the morning sun,
Mm-hmm.
and they're bowing to the morning sun. Horus. This whole ritual is about the Horus sun god. Who did Isis birth via this phallic symbol, this dildo that made of stone, that's the Washington
Horus.
Monument? She birthed Horus.
Right.
What's happening in our country? You have this choice. You're going to worship the rising sun, the sun god, the Masonic, east, always east. Where are we going? East, always east. They're worshiping the sun god. It's a religion. Your country is being run by a bunch of occult religion people. Okay? Occultists, hidden in plain sight. Look at Bill Maher over in Hollywood. He's a wizard in his wizardry. He's Hugh Hefner's kid. Okay,
Oh,
didn't
wow.
you know that?
Yeah, they look alike. Holy crap.
Yeah, he's a wizard in Hollywood. Runs the Sanctum operation, which is like Nexium. It's another sex cult.
Yeah, that's why he's a red shoe.
Fertility cult. He likes the red shoes.
Yep.
Go into the qmap.pub players, persons, and then go scroll down and find Bill Maher and see what he's dressed like. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Hollywood with the Hollywood wand, and he's dressed like a wizard. He's running that stuff, has a big part in it. You're seeing an occult religious operation. We're at that moment in time. Pick a path. You're going to stick with the occultists and cry because, their plans to enslave you, their way of enslaving you is being damaged? Or are you going to have the death angel pass over you, see the future, and count your future with these patriots who are running the country at this moment in time, who have the ball, and over these next 6 months are going to continue to build out this new future for America, this foundation moment for everything to follow. This is the foundation moment. What do you put on a foundation? The rest of the building. We're going to pick up these agency heads that were part of the corruption, who were aligning themselves with British intelligence, this whole MI6 crowd, this Dear Love crowd, this Helper crowd out of Cambridge, this American who has an American and a British passport that tried to engineer this impeachment thing, this dossier, all this bull fucking shit that these damn Brits were doing against America, trying to win this revolutionary war. Ultimately, they were trying to sink us like the Titanic and keep us sunk, and we're about to rise again. You want to talk about raising the Titanic? Bringing the Fed back under U.S. operation, kicking the IRS into the freaking oblivion forever. This is that moment. Pick a side. I say get on the good guy's side. Let's go get Haman's sons and stop this.
Yeah.
Stop it forever. And I think that's what the Trump team has in mind. I think that's the way you have to look at this. Get your head out of your ass and help the people around you to see the bigger, longer picture. This is the same kind of a fight being played for and against, like we had when we took down the Soviet Union. We're trying to take down the globalists. It's a much longer fight than just the fight for America. We've got to win our war right now with this president, and out into the future, win the war for the planet against these globalists that think that 13 out of every 14 people should be dead, and their bloodlines should survive. Their royalty should survive. Their children of Cain should survive because they hate your guts with a passion. Get your head out of your ass and get in the fight.
Absolutely. Very well said, my man. Very well said. And folks, we're at the end of the broadcast. W, you were supposed to come out for 40 minutes, man. We were into this like almost 2.5 hours. I love it.
Oh, man. Jeez. I don't get it. I've got so much I've got to do here, too.
I know.
But I'm glad to get a chance to talk with your audience. I hope that they, that there's some stuff in there that's going to help them. And I'm sorry it took so long, but, if they enjoyed it, great. Hopefully they had a little time on their hands and it wasn't quite so cumbersome to take that long. So appreciate the opportunity to talk to your folks there, V.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure always to have you on. Folks, hit the subscribe button, hit us with a thumbs up, and share this with your friends and tell them also to subscribe as well. We have a great programs here over here on Rogue News. So make sure you guys are, especially if you love the geopolitical and geoeconomic, this is the place to be. And as well, you're alerted every single time the W comes on. And with that being said, folks, thank you all so much. Have yourselves a wonderful week. Cheers.